Okay, so good evening, everybody. Good to see you all back here again to continue the journey of the Buddha in the Maha Parinibbana Sutta.
Bante mengucapkan selamat malam dan senang bertemu Anda semua kembali untuk melanjutkan perjalanan Sang Buddha di dalam Maha Parinibbana Sutta.
We've followed the Buddha from the first encounter with King Ajatasattu and his minister wanting to declare war on the Vajjis. We followed the Buddha's journey to the north to the growing city of Pataligama, crossing the Ganges River and heading north to Vesali.
Jadi kita sebelumnya sudah melihat yang pertama kali itu Buddha bertemu dengan Ajatasattu yang pada saat itu menyatakan keinginannya untuk perang. Yang kedua, Buddha menuju ke arah utara ke suatu kota yang berkembang yang disebut I forgot the name of the city. Pataliputta.
Of course, in Vesali today, if you visit it, you'll find that they still have an Ashokan pillar there.
Dan sekarang Buddha sedang menuju di Vesali, dan kalau Anda berkunjung ke Vesali sekarang ini, Anda dapat melihat pilar Asoka.
So it's actually a very wonderful thing that we have today, that the holy sites of the Buddha, the place the Buddha lived, all of these places that we're hearing about in this sutta, have actually been discovered. We know where they are.
Jadi jika Anda berkunjung ke sana, tentunya Anda akan merasa seperti takjub karena kota-kota yang dituliskan di sutta-sutta ini Anda dapat melihat tempat-tempat suci tersebut.
So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story of how these were discovered, but for many hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, all of these sites were unknown.
Jadi Bante tidak tahu apakah Anda semua sudah mengetahui bahwa sebelumnya selama berapa ratus tahun bahkan ribuan tahun kota-kota ini belum ditemukan.
Most of them were discovered in the late 19th century.
Kebanyakan dari kota-kota tersebut baru ditemukan di abad 19.
And the main person who rediscovered them was an English civil servant called Alexander Cunningham.
Yang menemukannya adalah seorang pegawai negeri Inggris, Alexander Cunningham.
And he was the head or the founder of the Indian Archaeological Society.
Dan ia merupakan kepala dari arkeolog India, perkumpulan arkeologi India.
And what they were able to do in that time for the first time is they could draw together both the local knowledge of places in India.
Jadi apa yang mereka dapat lakukan adalah mereka dapat menggambarkan tempat-tempat lokal dari India.
The knowledge from the Buddhist scriptures from Sri Lanka.
Terus kemudian pengetahuan tentang sutta-sutta skripter agama Buddha dari Sri Lanka.
And especially what was important was the accounts of the Chinese pilgrims.
Yang terutama yang penting adalah perjalanan dari orang-orang Cina.
Especially the account of Xuanzang.
Terutama perjalanannya. What's the name of that?
Xuanzang.
Is that the one from the Monkey King something?
Exactly, the Monkey King.
Ya, itu siapa gurunya Sun Gokong? Saya lupa namanya. Atau Sangcong ya.
That's how I learnt about him too.
Okay.
Yeah. So and Xuanzang actually, others as well, Fa Xiang and others, but Xuanzang wrote a very detailed account where he would say he visited such and such a monastery at such and such a town and then travelled for so many yojanas to the next town, and so he gave very detailed accounts of all his travels.
Jadi sebenarnya ada catatan-catatan dari orang lain selain itu tadi To Samcong itu, tetapi yang menulis secara mendetail adalah To Samcong. Jadi dia kalau berada di satu tempat monastery, satu wihara, dia akan menuliskannya, dan dia berjalan ke kota lainnya, dia akan menulis berapa yojana dia berjalan. Jadi orang bisa mendapatkan informasinya dengan baik.
And so Cunningham would travel from one place to another with this as his guidebook, and when he got to where he thought one of these places should be, then he'd ask around in the local villages, see if anybody knew of any ancient sites.
Jadi Alexander Cunningham menggunakan petunjuk ini dan memulai perjalanannya dari satu kota ke kota lainnya, dan kalau dia udah tiba di kota tersebut, dia mulai menanyakan orang-orang Indian lokal apakah pernah melihat satu tempat-tempat yang kuno.
So this is how the places like Bodh Gaya, Vesali, Savatthi, and so on have all been rediscovered.
Nah, inilah bagaimana tempat-tempat suci seperti Bodh-Gaya dan yang lainnya ditemukan.
Okay, so now we come to the story of Ambapali, the courtesan.
Sekarang kita akan kembali ke cerita Ambapali. Ini maafkan saya nggak bisa ketemu bahasa sopannya daripada courtesan. Courtesan itu pelacur.
And if we remember the story yesterday, the Buddha was staying in her mango grove, and when he knew that she was about to come, he warned the monks to be mindful.
Jadi kalau kita ingat kemarin ceritanya mereka Buddha dan para biku ada berada di perkebunan mangga, dan karena tahu Ambapali akan datang, maka Buddha memperingatkan para biku untuk selalu waspada, mindful.
Okay, so let's pick up the story here.
Nah, sekarang ceritanya akan dimulai.
Then Ambapali the courtesan came to know the Blessed One, they say, has arrived in Vesali and is now staying in my mango grove. And she ordered a large number of magnificent carriages to be made ready, mounted one of them herself, and accompanied by the rest, she drove out from Vesali towards her park. She went by carriage as far as the carriage could go, then alighted and approached the Blessed One on foot. She respectfully greeted him and sat down at one side. And the Blessed One instructed Ambapali the courtesan in the Dhamma and roused, edified and gladdened her.
Jadi Ambapali ya WTS yang tadi itu dia mengetahui bahwa Sang Bhagawa ada di sana, sehingga Sang Bhagawa telah tiba di Vesali dan sekarang sedang tinggal di perkebunan mangga. Oleh karena itu, ia memesan kereta yang megah banyak sekali untuk dipersiapkan, dan dia sendiri naik ke salah satunya, ditemani oleh banyak yang lainnya, dan mulai berangkat dari Vesali menuju ke perkebunan mangga tersebut. Dia menaiki kereta itu sampai sejauh kereta itu dapat membawa dia. Kemudian dia turun mendekati Sang Bhagawa dengan kakinya berjalan kaki. Kemudian dia memberikan hormat kepada Sang Bhagawa dan duduk di salah satu sisinya. Kemudian Sang Buddha memberikan instruksi kepada Ambapali, instruksi tentang Dhamma, dan ini kemarin diterjemahkan dengan menyemangati ya, membuat Ambapali menjadi tertarik dalam Dhamma.
So Ambapali, of course, as a courtesan, or if you like, as a high-class prostitute, she was something like, she would have been something like the geishas of Japan, very sort of somebody who was skilled in various kind of arts and music and these kinds of things. And it's quite clear from the description she was extremely wealthy and very well respected. Actually, you find a very quite amusing dialogue in another passage where the ministers of Rajagaha are complaining because all the tourists are going to Vesali because Ambapali is so popular.
Jadi di sini sebenarnya Ambapali itu statusnya adalah seorang pelacur kelas tinggi. Kata Bante disamakan seperti seorang geisha yang ada di Jepang. Jadi dia terampil dalam seni, musik dan lain-lainnya. Dan di sini kita bisa melihat bahwa Ambapali itu adalah orang yang kaya dan sangat dihormati. Dan kalau ada kutipan lainnya di sutta yang lain, ada percakapan yang sangat menarik, yaitu ada satu orang yang komplain, mengeluh bahwa turis-turis ramai ke Vesali karena ada si Ambapali.
And so they say, okay, well, to attract the tourist dollar, we'd better have our own town prostitute to draw in the tourists.
Jadi mereka sepakat kalau mau supaya ada turis berkunjung ke kotanya, kita mesti punya pelacur yang seperti si Ambapali di kota.
Okay, so anyway, back to Ambapali. I just should give sort of I mean, Ambapali is one of the best-known characters in the Buddhist tradition. I won't talk too much about her and her history, but just so that you should know that after this event, she later on in her life she became a nun. She became a bhikkhuni. She ordained, she practiced, and she became an arahant. And she actually gave some very powerful and very beautiful verses which are preserved in the Pali Canon, in the Therigatha.
Jadi Ambapali ini adalah salah satu sosok yang sangat dikenal dalam agama Buddha. Cuman Bante tidak akan membahas secara mendetail. Nanti dalam perjalanan hidupnya dia akan menjadi seorang bhikkhuni, bahkan mencapai status arahat, dan ada di dalam Theravadi, what's that? Di Therigatha Sutta ada kayak sajak-sajak yang memuji beliau.
Which, just to remind you one thing. I think I said at the beginning of the talk that we can't say that everything in the Pali canon comes from the time of the Buddha. Obviously, Ambapali was not a nun yet, so the verses she gave must have been added quite some years after this. She reflects in those verses on her old age and the decay of her body in her old age. So, clearly this must be a number of decades after the event that we're seeing today.
Jadi kalau kita ingat pada saat pertama kali kita belajar sutta ini, Bante selalu mengingatkan bahwa apa yang ditulis di sini belum tentu didapatkan pada saat Buddha Parinibbana. Karena pada saat Ambapali melakukan refleksi dan menuliskan sajak-sajak, tentu saja pada saat itu beliau belum menjadi seorang arahat dan beliau sedang merefleksi kalau usia tua, badannya busuk dan segala macam.
Okay, so then Ambapali said to the Buddha, "May the Blessed One please accept my invitation for tomorrow's meal together with the Sangha of bhikkhus," and that by his silence the Blessed One consented. When Ambapali knew that the Blessed One had consented, she rose from her seat, respectfully saluted him, keeping her right side towards him, took her departure.
Nah, setelah itu Ambapali berbicara kepada Sang Bhagawa mengatakan, semoga Sang Bhagawa berkenan untuk menerima undangan saya untuk jamuan makan besok bersama dengan komunitas biku lainnya, dan Sang Bhagawa menyetujuinya dengan berdiam diri. Kemudian setelah Sang Bhagawa menyetujui, Ambapali berbangkit dari tempat duduknya, memberikan hormat kepada beliau dan tetap menjaga sisi kanannya kepada Sang Buddha waktu Ambapali meninggalkan tempat tersebut.
Now then the Lichavis of Vesali came to know. The Blessed One, they say, has arrived at Vesali and is now staying at Ambapali's grove. And they also ordered a large number of magnificent carriages to be made ready. Each mounted one, and accompanied by the rest, they drove out from Vesali. Now, of these Lichavis, some were in blue, with ornaments and clothing all of blue, while others were all in yellow, some were all in red, and some were all in white.
Okay, the Lichavis are race of Vesali or people?
The Lichavis were the like one of the noble clans of Vesali. They're a bit like the Sakyans would have been in Kapilavatthu. Okay. So the Lichavis were one of the noble clans of Vesali.
Okay. Yeah. Lichavi ini adalah salah satu kaum ningrat di kota Vesali, sama seperti suku Sakya di Kapilavatthu. Jadi begitu kaum ini mengetahui bahwa Sang Bhagawa ada di sana, ada di Vesali dan sekarang sedang tinggal di tempatnya Ambapali, maka mereka juga sama menyiapkan kereta kencana yang megah, yang banyak untuk dipersiapkan, dan setiap orang dari mereka naik ke satu dan ditemani oleh kelompok yang lainnya, kemudian keluar dari Vesali. Sekarang orang-orang Likawi ini beberapanya berpakaian warna biru dan ada yang pakai perhiasannya berwarna biru dan ada juga yang warna kuning, merah dan putih.
So this is a very typical description of the Lichavis. I mean, they were kind of gay, really. They were all kind of dressed up in their fine colors and things like that. They really liked to look good.
Jadi ini adalah deskripsi yang umum tentang kaum Lichavi. Mereka itu gay itu bukan gay homo ya, bukan, tapi maksudnya orangnya meriah. Jadi kelihatan sekali dari baju-bajunya dan mereka selalu ingin tampak bagus kalau pergi.
And they're very contrasted with Ajatasattu, who's very kind of warlike and aggressive, and they're kind of, they like to get dressed up and have fun. And
jadi ini kontras sekali dengan Ajatasattu. Ajatasattu kan hanya tentang perang, tapi kalau yang orang-orang ini kelihatannya mereka yang sifatnya senang-senang aja, bergembira.
So it happened that Ambapali, the courtesan, drove up against the young Lichavis, axle by axle, wheel by wheel, and yoke by yoke. Thereby the Lichavis exclaimed, "Why do you drive up against us in this fashion, Ambapali?" And she replies, "Thus it is, my princes, and not otherwise, for the Blessed One is invited by me for tomorrow's meal together with the Sangha of bhikkhus." So they had like a traffic jam on the way to the monastery.
Jadi ini katanya seperti macet ya pada saat itu Ambapali jadi menuju ke tadi Lichavis misalnya dari arah sini, Ambapali dari arah yang satunya, sehingga si kaum Lichavi ini mengatakan, "Mengapa kamu menuju ke ke sini Ambapali. Terus kemudian Ambapali menjawab, memang demikianlah para pangeran, bukan yang sebaliknya, karena Sang Bagawa sudah diundang oleh saya untuk perjamuan makan besok bersama dengan komunitas biku yang lainnya.
And you thought that it was only in Jakarta that you had to sit in a traffic jam on the way to the temple.
Jadi bukan cuma di Jakarta doang yang ada macet kalau mau menuju ke wihara.
So the Lichavi said to Ambapali, "Give up the meal, Ambapali, for 100,000. But she replied, "Even if you were to give me all of Vesali and all of the lands around, I would not give up a meal of such importance."
Kemudian kaum Lichavinya mengatakan kepada Ambali, nyerah aja, aku nanti kasih kamu 100.000. Kemudian Ambapali menjawab, bahkan kalau kamu memberikan satu kota Vesali pun dan semua tanah di sekelilingnya, saya tidak akan menyerahkan jamuan yang begitu penting.
Then the Lichavis snapped their fingers in annoyance. "See, friends, we're defeated by this mango girl. We're utterly outdone by this mango girl." But they continued on their way to Ambapali's grove.
Jadi kaum Lichavi ini kemudian, this is snapping like this. Ya. Jadi kaum Lichavisnya melakukan itu ya, saya nggak tahu bahasa Indonesia apa, tapi dia marah. Lihat teman-teman, kita ini masa kalah oleh seorang gadis pohon mangga, gadis mangga. Kita diduluin oleh si gadis mangga, tapi mereka tetap menuju ke tempat Ambapali, ke perkebunannya Ambapali.
So the snapping of the fingers thing, I never understood that until I read in the Mahabharata, where they had descriptions of, and not just Mahabharata, but also in the Jatakas, they have descriptions of wrestling matches. And when they have wrestling matches, they kind of snap their fingers at each other to try to intimidate the opponent. So it seems to be that was a kind of a battle kind of sign that you snapped your fingers to try to intimidate each other.
Jadi Bante sendiri juga tadinya nggak ngerti kenapa ada snapping fingers ini. Ternyata dibaca di Mahabharata. Where else besides Mahabharata you said?
It was in Mahabharata and the Jatakas also.
Di Jatika juga ada katanya. Jadi pada saat itu sering ada pertandingan wrestling dan biasanya mereka melakukan ini untuk mengintimidasi lawan. Jadi ini merupakan tanda untuk kalau kita tuh mau nyerang, dalam posisi mau nyerang.
So just to note that when they call her this mango lass or this mango girl, actually her name Ambapali, Amba is a word meaning mango. So Ambapali means literally like the guardian of the mangoes. Of course she has a mango grove and she's called the mango girl here. So she's everything about her is mango-ish, mango flavored.
Jadi kenapa dipanggil sebagai gadis mangga? Karena namanya sendiri Ambapali itu artinya adalah mangga. Amba itu artinya mangga. Jadi si Ambapali ini dianggap sebagai guardian atau wali dari mangga atau orang yang memiliki perkebunan mangga. Jadi semua tentang Ambapali itu seperti berbau mangga-mangga.
And when the Blessed One saw the Lichavis coming from afar, and he said to the bhikkhu, saying, "Those of you monks who have not yet seen the 33 gods, look at the assembly of the Lichavis, gaze upon them, for they are just like the assembly of the 33 gods."
Jadi ketika Sang Bagawa melihat kaum Lichavi dari jauh, ketika mereka datang ke sana, kemudian Sang Bagawa mengatakan, para biku, kalian semua yang belum pernah melihat dewa-dewa 33, nih kalau kamu lihat kumpulan kaum Lichavis dan kamu memperhatikan dia dengan seksama, gaze itu agak sedikit melotot ya melihatnya. Maka kalian dapat melihat mereka ini hampir mirip seperti kumpulan dari dewa-dewa 33.
I'm sure that must have been a magnificent sight, all in their kind of their matching clothes and the matching horses and harnesses and things. Actually, when I was in India a number of years ago, we were sitting, I think it was in Kusinara, and kind of India, you see just about everything. It's all kind of jammed in together. And suddenly we just saw driving down the road this old Brahmin who was wearing all white with a beautiful white horse and a beautiful white carriage with all white straps and everything on the... It's just like he just stepped right out of the suttas, and he was very dignified, taking his time, just going down the road. Nothing was going to faze him. He wasn't worried about all the cars or anything like that. And he just I thought, wow, India is just... Some parts of India just never change.
Jadi kata Bante, kalau kita membayangkannya itu pasti adalah pemandangan yang luar biasa ya. Karena bajunya semuanya kan berwarna-warni, udah gitu mereka ramai sekali. Nah, Bante sendiri punya pengalaman waktu di Kusinara di India. Di India itu kan ramai banget, jadi biasanya semuanya sort of jam, jadi kumpul kayak barengan di situ. Nah, Bante pernah melihat seorang Brahma pakai bajunya putih, naik kuda putih, semua yang dipakainya perhiasannya tuh putih, aksesorinya warnanya putih. Dan itu kata Bante seolah-olah Bante melihat ada sesuatu yang keluar dari suta, kayak zaman masih suta-suta gitu. Kayaknya sesuatu yang aneh ngelihat kuda putih, orang yang naiknya putih, dan seolah-olah tidak peduli pada mobil-mobil yang ada di sana. Kata Bante sesuatu tentang India tidak pernah berubah. Ada sesuatu dari India yang tidak pernah berubah.
So the Lichavis, as with the Buddha, as with Ambapali, they drove their carriages up to the Buddha, then went up by foot, and the Buddha gave them a Dhamma talk.
Jadi sama seperti tadi Ambapali, Lichavis juga menggunakan keretanya sampai tempat batas di mana kereta itu dapat pergi, kemudian turun berjalan menuju Sang Bhagawa. Setelah memberi hormat, duduk di salah satu sisi, kemudian Sang Bhagawa memberikan instruksi Dhamma.
And then they said, may the Blessed One please accept our invitation for tomorrow's meal together with the Sangha of Bhikkhus. But the Buddha said, the invitation for tomorrow's meal, Lichavis, has been accepted by me from Ambapali, the courtesan.
Jadi sama seperti tadi, kaum Lichavis juga mengatakan kepada Sang Bhagawa, semoga Sang Bhagawa mendapat berkenan menerima undangan untuk jamuan makan besok bersama dengan komunitas biku lainnya. Namun Sang Bhagawa menjawab bahwa undangan untuk jamuan makan besok telah diterima oleh Sang Bhagawa dari Ambapali.
And the Lichavis snapped their fingers again. We're defeated by this mango girl. We've been outdone by this mango girl. So then they took their leave from the Buddha.
Jadi seperti yang tadi lagi kan, kalau marah nggak senang mereka itu tadi jarinya di snap gitu, karena merasa dikalahkan oleh tadi si gadis mangga.
So this is something which you still kind of see sometimes in the Buddhist world. You know, people sort of competing to see who can offer dana to the bhikkhus.
Nah, ini sampai zaman sekarang pun kita masih lihat begini, orang berkompetisi untuk memberikan dana, siapa yang bisa memberikan dana paling hebat ke biku.
And sometimes, you know, that people will get their own food and they'll sort of put that in a prominent place and they'll take away the food someone else has given.
Kadang-kadang bahkan saking berkompetisinya, jadi gini, kalau mereka bawa makanan, mereka akan taruh tempat makanan tersebut di tempat yang strategis, sedangkan menyingkirkan makanan orang lain di pinggir-pinggir.
Or people also like to give to the senior monks. So if they think that you're very senior, or then they like to give you lots of food, but they don't give so much food to the poor old junior monks.
Kadang-kadang juga kalau bikunya senior, biasanya umatnya senang kasih makanan pada biku senior, sedangkan biku-biku yang junior tuh biasanya jarang dikasih makan.
One time when Ajahn Chah, near the end of Ajahn Chah's life, when he spent the rains retreat at a little village monastery not far from his main monastery at Wat Pah Pong.
Jadi ada satu saat mendekati masa akhirnya Ajahn Chah, beliau menempati satu desa kecil yang dekat dengan wihara beliau di Wat Pah Pong ya, tapi wasanya dia spend di tempat lain, bukan di Wat Pah Pong. Wat Pah Pong itu tempat utamanya Ajahn Chah.
And there's about 80 monks at his main monastery, but Ajahn Chah was only staying with 3 or 4 monks.
Jadi di tempat utamanya ada sekitar 80 biku, tapi Ajahn Chah tinggal di luar dari situ, di satu desa kecil dengan 3 biku.
And in those days, in that part of Thailand, the food was very simple, very rough.
Dan pada saat itu biasanya makanannya itu sederhana dan nggak begitu enak.
But one day they had these people drove all the way from Bangkok and bought this huge meal to offer to the monks.
Dan tapi ada satu hari ada orang dari Bangkok yang bawa makanan di truk ya ke tempat monastrinya Ajahn Chah nih.
And they'd unloaded all of this food and all of these curries and desserts and sweets and fruit and everything, and they were just about to offer it to the Sangha.
Dan mereka menurunkan tuh semua makanan yang enak, ada kari, ada dessert tuh makanan-makanan yang manis ya, pokoknya buah-buahan, pokoknya semua yang enak-enak udah diturunin sebelum mau di-offer, mau dipersembahkan ke Sangha.
And the monks had only eaten sticky rice and bananas and dried fish for a long time.
Nah, biasanya biku-biku di sana udah makan ikan kering, terus udah gitu nasi-nasi yang udah lengket-lengket gitu. Jadi udah lama makan ini, begitu ngeliat makanan itu tentunya seneng ya.
So they're all sitting there trying not to get excited about the meal.
Tapi tentu aja kalau biku kan nggak boleh terlalu kelihatan excited kalau melihat makanan ini, jadi mencoba untuk tenang-tenang tampaknya.
And then the donors said, "Oh, where's Ajahn Chah?"
Tapi donaturnya nanya, di manakah Ajahn Chah?
And they said, "Oh, he's staying down the road at the other monastery."
Oh, Ajahn Chah tinggal di tempat yang lainnya, bukan di sini.
Oh, so they said, "Okay." So they got all their food, put it back in their car.
Jadi makanannya diangkut lagi ke dalam truk, dibawa.
Oh, it's a very good teaching for all those monks.
Itu adalah ajaran yang luar biasa hebat buat biku-biku itu.
Okay, so after the night, the Buddha went the next morning to Ambapali's for dana, and she served them with the meal.
Dan setelah malam itu Ambapali menyiapkan makanan dan memberikannya kepada Sang Bagawa.
And afterwards, she said to the Buddha, "I offer to the Sangha of bhikkhus this park, this grove that she had, to the Sangha headed by the Buddha."
Dan selain itu Ambapali juga mempersembahkan tempat tersebut kepada Sang Bagawa.
And then the Buddha accepted the park.
Dan Buddha menerima tempat tersebut. Tempatnya ini park ya, jadi kayak taman.
So in those days, it seemed that the wealth was one of the practices among the wealthy, that they would have like a grove or a piece of parkland which they would keep and they would maintain and they would look after. And but those parks, you know, as you saw originally, that the Buddha just came along and they just stayed there. They didn't have to ask her for permission or anything like that. So it seemed that they were just open for any wandering ascetics would come and stay in those places. And it was also quite common that when people had gained faith in the Buddha, that then they would offer the park to the Buddha or to the Sangha for their use permanently.
Jadi tradisinya pada zaman tersebut adalah kalau orang-orang yang kaya biasanya mereka punya tanah kayak perkebunan atau taman, dan taman ini akan mereka pelihara. Dan kalau kita lihat Sang Buddha melewati taman tersebut, mereka berhak tinggal di situ tanpa perlu minta izin oleh pemiliknya. Dan itu juga tradisi bahwa kalau orang-orang lainnya, pertapa lainnya juga boleh tinggal di sana. Dan biasanya kalau orang kaya ini sudah punya keyakinan terhadap Sang Buddha, biasanya mereka juga akan mempersembahkan taman tersebut kepada Sang Buddha.
And once more, while staying there at Ambapali's grove, the Buddha taught sila, samadhi, and panya to all the bhikkhus.
Dan seperti yang kita lihat sebelumnya, satu kali lagi Sang Bagawa ketika tinggal di sana juga mengajarkan sila, samadhi, dan panya kepada para bhikkhu.
And then he said to Venerable Ananda, "Let's go to the village of Beluva."
Kemudian Sang Bagawa mengatakan kepada Ananda, mari kita pergi ke desa Beluwa.
So he went to Beluva together with the large sangha of bhikkhus.
Maka pergilah Sang Bagawa bersama dengan komunitas bhikkhu yang besar.
Now then the Buddha spoke to the bhikkhus saying, "Go now, bhikkhus, and seek shelter anywhere in the neighborhood of Vesali where you are welcome, among acquaintances and friends, and there spend the rainy season. As for me, I shall spend the rainy season in this very place, in the village of Beluva. So be it, O Lord," said the bhikkhus.
Pada saat itu Sang Bagawa mengatakan kepada para bhikkhu, pergilah para bhikkhu dan carilah tempat bernaung di mana saja di sekitar Vesali, di mana kalian di welcome atau dipersilakan di antara orang-orang atau teman-teman, antara saudara-saudara, dan Anda tinggal selama wasa di sana. Sedangkan untuk saya akan menetap selama wasa di desa Beluwa. Baiklah Sang Bagawa, kata para bhikkhu.
So the Buddha, most of the time the Buddha spent the rains retreat at the large monastery, the Jetavana in Savatthi. But this, as he's just approaching this was his final rains retreat, he decided to spend it just with Ananda, just staying in this small village. I guess probably he maybe didn't feel like having to deal with all of the business and so on in a big monastery and all of the teaching. Maybe just wanted to spend more of a quiet rains retreat together with Ananda.
Jadi biasanya kebanyakan dari wasanya Sang Bagawa selalu menetap di Jetavana di Savatthi. Namun pada akhir-akhir hidupnya, final rain retreatnya, jadi retreat wasa terakhirnya, Sang Bagawa ingin mungkin mempunyai waktu yang lebih banyak dengan Ananda, waktu yang lebih quiet ya, lebih diam. Kalau tinggal di tempat yang monastery yang besar, kemungkinan dia harus banyak mengatasi masalah-masalah yang ada di sana.
When the Blessed One had entered on the rains retreat, there arose in him a severe illness, and sharp and deadly pains came upon him. The Blessed One endured them mindfully, clearly comprehending and unperturbed.
Namun ketika Sang Bagawa memasuki masa wasa, ya dia di dalam tubuhnya itu timbul penyakit yang sangat berat, sangat tajam, dan rasa sakitnya itu luar biasa. Namun Sang Bagawa dapat menahannya, dapat secara mindful, dengan kesadaran penuh, mengerti dengan jelas, memahaminya dengan jelas, dan tidak tergoyahkan.
And so it's from here that the Buddha's mortality, in the story, the Buddha's mortality is becoming more and more present.
Dan di sini kita bisa lihat bahwa kematian Sang Buddha semakin mendekat.
Even though at 80 years old he's still obviously, generally speaking, quite strong and quite healthy, but still his physical body is still subject to sickness.
Jadi walaupun kita bisa melihat Sang Buddha udah tua dan lumayan punya tubuh yang agak sehat, namun kita bisa lihat bahwa itu tidak luput dari rasa kesakitan.